Headlines here in France. In the press, Florence Villeminot is here with me. Good morning. Lots of focus, of course, on the spread of Ebola and fears of a global pandemic.
That's right. There's a lot of fear today in the French press. Let's start by looking at the front page of Libération. It talks about Ebola, the virus of fear. Now, Ebola appears to be spiraling out of control in West Africa, but a lot of European papers are focusing on what's happening here in Europe. For now, only 3 people in the West have been contaminated outside of Africa. So we have those 2 nurses in the U.S., 1 nurse in Spain. So there are very few cases in Europe, but it's still a real source of concern. There are all sorts of scary rumors flying around, rumors that there could be this global pandemic that's about to break out. La Croix focuses on the role that the media it should be playing right now, as well as health officials. And you can see here, they talk about how it's important to inform people without alarming them. This is no time to panic, says La Croix.
Now, of course, admitting all the while that it's very difficult not to do exactly that.
That's right. La Croix says it's pretty tricky because on the one hand, you have this official line that's coming from health officials and governments that Ebola is actually not that contagious within a informed population that is well-equipped medically. But if you take a look online, it's very easy to panic because you have commentators that are stressing the 50% chance of survival if you do actually end up catching Ebola. And then a lot of commentators are wondering, is the protocol that's being put in place in many European countries, is it actually effective? And La Croix actually compares what's happening now to what happened 5 years ago when there was there's those fears that there could be an H1N1 pandemic. And La Croix said that ended up being a false alarm. A lot of people were very worried at the time. And all we can hope for is that this is going to be the same thing.
As you said, there are a lot of focus on the security protocol that's been put in place, France.
That's right, because Libération points out that in Spain and in the U.S., it was health officials, health personnel who were wearing protective suits who were infected. And none of this is very reassuring, especially because these are people who were trained how to deal with Ebola. So it definitely feeds into a lot of fears. And Aujourd'hui en France focuses on the fact that yesterday here in France, there were fears that a French nurse might have been contaminated. In the end, this nurse tested negative. But as you can see, Aujourd'hui en France says this really brings to light the fact that nurses are on the front line when it comes to Ebola. And nurses themselves, health personnel, they're raising their voices as well, wondering if the protocol that's being put in place is it going to be effective? And all this is feeding into these kind of fears that we're talking about.
Now, Le Figaro is focusing, for its part, on what the international community is doing to fight Ebola at its source.
That's right, and Le Figaro has put together very useful maps showing how various countries are donating money. For instance, you have the U.S. that's donating $350 million for now. Hopefully that's going to be more. France, 89.2 million euros. Cuba has sent 165 health professionals to West Africa. So you have countries, but you also have private donors as well. For instance, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has donated $50 million. You have Facebook as well, all sorts of private efforts as well to help in this international measures against Ebola. Le Figaro in its editorial says that the battle for Ebola will be won or lost in Africa. It's very critical, though, of the international community today for not reacting quick enough. It says that at the beginning, not only was the international community indifferent, it was acting quite proud and superior, saying that the reason why Ebola was spiraling out of control in Africa is because their health system is much inferior to the European one. But now it turns out that our European health system isn't infallible either. So they received a real slap in the face having these nurses get infected. Le Figaro says, it's ironic that the West wasn't doing anything when you had thousands of cases in Africa, but you just get a handful in Europe and in the U.S., and all of a sudden, everyone's kind of panicking, snapping into action. They talk about the coalition of inaction that has given place to a global mobilization against this very global virus. But so far, the response is disorganized and panicky, according to Le Figaro. And all this is really bringing back a very ancestral fear here in Europe, and that is the fear of the Black Plague.
Now, many papers also focusing on what's happening on the ground, Florence, in Africa, where, of course, the fight goes on. We've been talking about it in our news bulletin. Libération sent a team of reporters to the Liberian capital, Monrovia.
That's right. It's in one neighborhood in particular, West Point. That's a neighborhood that's home to some 80,000 people who live in very, very close proximity. That neighborhood was put in quarantine on August 18th in an attempt to stop the virus, but Libération reports that that isn't really being applied. The anti-Ebola measures aren't really a priority for locals who, according to Libération, are more concerned with just getting on with their everyday lives. And on top of that, there's a certain defiance against authorities that's growing in this neighborhood. Libération reports about scuffles with police, but also people giving fake names to medical personnel, people running away from Ebola centers. To quote the article, it says that some people think that they will be killed in these medical centers. They have no faith whatsoever in the medical personnel that's there. So Libération says that officially 62 people have died in the West Point neighborhood since the outbreak of the virus, but nobody really knows what the real figure is for now.
Okay, huge amounts of underreporting, no doubt. There, it's something we've been talking a great deal about as well. Thank you very much, Florence Vimino, with a look there at what is making headlines in the French newspapers today. 22 minutes past 7. It's time to have a look at what is attracting attention, what's making waves on the World Wide Web. It's Web News.